Well, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I started writing children's books when my kids were very young. I have three kids and they're adults now, but when they were younger, we were reading a lot of books at home, and I just fell in love with children's books all over again. And I noticed that sometimes when I was reading to them, they would just get up and go play with their toys, and I'd still be on the floor reading these picture books to myself. I really love this genre of writing. So I just started doing a lot of research into children's books, went to the library a lot, went to bookstores, read as much as I could, and just started writing. It took a long time to get published. I will say that. This is going back a long time before, like, the internet was a very new thing, believe it or not. And so there weren't as many resources that you could find on how to publish a book. So you actually had to go to a bookstore and get a book on how to publish a book. And so after a while, I just connected with other writers and started going to writers' conferences. And I had a lot to learn about the process. And over the time, I acquired over like 200 rejection letters from different publishers back in the day when we used to send good old-fashioned letters with stamps, and they would send me paper rejection letters in the mail. And so it took a while to kind of figure my way through it, just like with any creative, whether you are doing animation or books or movies, there's always a lot to learn. And but I enjoyed the process, and now I have over 35 published children's books.
What are some of the books that inspired and influenced you to become a writer?
There were quite a few books that influenced me. I think the one that probably had one of the biggest impacts was a book called The True Story of the Three Little Pigs by John Cheska. It was a picture book, and it was told from the point of view of the wolf and not the three pigs. And I just loved the voice in the story. It was very funny, and it's kind of like this conspiracy theory. And it just had all these different layers to the story. And it was a book that I can enjoy reading as a parent, but my kids still enjoyed. And so I was like, oh, that's the kind of stories that I want to write. I want to write books that kids can enjoy and that adults can still enjoy reading too. So that was probably one of the first that I read that I was like, oh, wow, there's some really cool children's books out there. And because at the time I was reading a lot of, books, like shorter books like Spot or Barbie or Thomas the Train, and those were wonderful for my kids. But I was looking for other things that I could enjoy reading as a parent. And so that was probably one of them. One of the books that influenced me the most when I was a kid was the book Horton Hears a Who by Dr. Seuss. When I was a kid and I read that story, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's about Horton, who's an elephant. And of course, he has big ears, and he's the only one who can hear that there's this whole other world, this whole other civilization living on this little tuft of clover. And nobody believes him. They all think he's crazy, but he can hear them. And that book just kind of changed the way I looked at the world when I was a kid. And I started to look at flowers differently and wonder, are there whole other civilizations living on this flower? Or I would look up at the stars and wonder if we were just a little speck of dust in some giant's universe. And so I think any book that can get you to look at the world differently or see things from a new perspective is just a really great book. So those were just a couple of the books that influenced me.
That was very cool that how you mentioned Horton Hears a Who, because I grew up reading Dr. Seuss as a kid. My favorite of all time has to be Green Eggs and Ham.
Yeah, I love that one too. It's just so fun to read. And I have a granddaughter now, and so it's kind of fun. She's only 2, but to revisit some of these books that I read to my kids, and also the books that I read as a child, and they're kind of classics. So it's really neat that these books are shared by many generations.
Actually, one thing that's very interesting is that Dr. Seuss really changed the literature world, and especially family-friendly media, for the better. Because one thing that really stuck out a lot of his work, he never talked down to their audience, to his audience. He understands that like children are far more intelligent than you really think they are. I mean, yes, they can be very easily entertained, but they're not that dumb. They can understand certain things when they see it. But yeah, it's kind of like that one quote that I heard about where it's basically a children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story. And I think that is something that is kind of lost nowadays.
I agree 100%. And I think, another thing that Dr. Seuss did for the children's book world was that he really embraced the idea that books should be fun and, was very creative and imaginative in making up words and just the silliness of it. Which prior to that, a lot of the, children's books were like these beginning readers and they were very stiff and a little bit preachy. And so he just kind of like changed the whole storyline, pun included, in terms of just, books should be fun. And that's what makes kids want to keep reading is to have that silliness and that fun. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. Thank you.
So I'm kind of in lieu of the golden books or whatever they're called, the ones with the golden
Yes, yeah, those have been around for a long time, the golden books, yeah. And yeah, a lot of there was a series called Dick and Jane back forever ago, which it was just these very simple books, but they were to teach reading. And so, but they were very dry, there wasn't a lot of, humor or fun in them. So yeah, so those are the kind of books I write all kinds of different books, but I do like to gravitate towards humor. I wrote a book called Everyone Loves Bacon, and which is really just silly. I wrote a book called Zombie in Love. It was kind of a love story for zombies, which was the very first picture book that had ever, brought a zombie on the scene. And so I write the books that I have fun like writing. If I'm not having fun writing, then I'm kind of like, are people going to have fun reading it? So that's kind of my gauge, is to always like tune into my feelings when I'm writing something. And so yeah, I love to write all kinds of different humor.
For like a good number of authors and writers, and this is a little bit I want to say of the time right now, there are a good number of authors whose writing or who their personal views don't necessarily reflect their writing, or I don't know the right way to say that this I'm trying not to make it sound like I'm trying to make it into a one type of argument or whatever. Just I think the core of the question is like, how do you feel about like when some people when I'm trying to like think of the right way to ask the question. Sometimes I talk
That's okay.
around
Take
it.
your
It's
time.
like trying to separate artist from art, because you can get a good number of book series that have authors who have very problematic views compared to their writing, which is very not problematic. I guess is the right way to say it. But
I think I know where you're going with this, because there is a lot of controversy around Dr. Seuss now. Some of the stuff that's come to light was that perhaps he was racist, and some of the old books were racist. And so becomes this debate: do we, throw away like his body of work in light of this new information, and then how we've grown and changed, hopefully, as a society? And so, yeah, that is a very big topic, and it's heavily debated now, very much so, about that, because he lived and wrote in a very different time period, and which his beliefs certainly don't line up with where we are now. And so, yeah, how do you separate the body of work from the person? And I don't know if that's even possible to do. But yeah, that's a really big conversation to have.
yeah, especially because, and I'm sorry, if I'm kind of turn this into that kind of conversation, there's also the argument for J.K. Rowling's works.
Mhm.
There's a large fan base
Mhm.
that are who is where it is very well known that J.K. Rowling is in opposition of some of the people that are in her fan base, even though a lot of the people in that fan base are basically like super huge fans. So yeah, it's kind of hard, especially for me, because I grew up reading a lot of these books, Dr. Seuss, Harry Potter, and all these kind of things or whatever. Sometimes it does get a little hard to kind of separate the writer who wrote these stories from the actual stories, even though I can't think of the right way to put this, but even though sometimes the stories, I think sometimes it's just as the older the writer gets, maybe their views change as well. But still, it's still kind of, it is hard, I guess.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it change. Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I think it does change your perspective in terms of like, how do I then process this? I love the book, but I don't love some of the views of the author. And can you reconcile the two? And some people absolutely can't, and some people can. And so yeah, that's it's definitely a really smart point to bring up, because it is kind of like where we are at now in the world in terms of there's really nowhere to hide anymore, and not saying that hiding is ever a good thing, because I think that it's important to know who the creator is behind the creation. But there's a lot of room there for judgment or grace, or to discard them entirely, depending on how your views are. And but I certainly think that being more in favor of acceptance of all people, and I'm not talking about certainly somebody who's racist or anything like that, but I'm talking about all different kinds of communities, and making sure that everybody feels seen and heard, and nobody is being unfairly targeted in any way, is important too.
Yeah, and it's a very important thing, and that's why that whole issue is just a whole problem, because there are a lot of people who enjoy some of these works that if they would want to meet the author, there's a high chance the author might detest them for even existing. I guess that might be a right way to put it, but I guess another, to detract from that, because that could go on for a whole like half an hour. At least because this is another timely thing with the whole writers' strike right now.
Mhm.
Now, what is your stance on for how there's a lot of like studios or bigger companies, just or even like artists or whatever, in their fears of AI? Personally, I feel like it should only be used for in a conceptual kind of thing, and anything afterwards, you should do 100% of the work, if not 90% of the work. And by 90% of the work, that's only like taking the concept off of that concept and then working off of that. I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, I stand in support of those writers who are striking, because I'm a little bit familiar with some of their concerns, and they're valid. So hopefully that will get resolved soon. But in terms of AI, yeah, that's a whole can of worms. Ever since now we see how in terms of illustrations, it seems like they're ripping off artists right and left in terms of using their art and manipulating it. And a friend of mine actually showed me a website recently where you can hire AI to write your children's book for you. You just kind of type in your idea and maybe a couple characters' names, and it comes up with it, not just the story but the art as well, because you can choose the different styles of art. And I'm personally, I'm appalled by that, because I don't know, where is your creativity in that? Where is that spark that each of us have individually that we want to imbue in that work, to have this artificial intelligence to create it for us. And I'm not saying there's not a place for AI, because I really think there is a place for it in our world. Obviously, we live with it all the time. But for me personally, I draw the line when it comes to any kind of, creative work, and original ideas. And so I just think that's kind of yucky.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
basically the sentiment we've kind of all shared, where it shouldn't be replacing creativity from people, and especially a thing you mentioned about the art side of it. And obviously, like I said, I'm more of the visual art side of the writing and all this kind of stuff. It's very common knowledge now that a lot of these AI works, especially a sample from thousands of other different artists or whatever, and it does it from books too, because it samples, just basically takes everything off the internet and samples it off of. It's like, technically none of this is original work, because this is basically taking from everybody else, and these people that could or are gaining money off of these books that are, or these stories that are being written by AI, didn't put the work in. So they can't, like, at least I feel like, if they're only using AI to write their stories or do their work, at least in my opinion, they can't really have a say in like the writing or art kind of side of the world or whatever. I don't know the right way to put that, but
yeah, I agree. And I think this conversation is one that's going to continue for a while. And it concerns me as a writer, because, our industry in general, the children's book industry, it's changed a lot, much like the music industry changed when everything kind of moved digitally. And, I'm just in favor of, good old fashioned, real books. And maybe I'm old fashioned in that way, but I think, particularly for children, to have a physical object to hold in their hands and to be able to turn the pages and to smell the book. I know that's weird, but books have smells, and I just think it's a whole experience, that if everything's on a tablet, you don't quite have that same visceral experience. And certainly, if you have something that's completely digitally created and, doesn't have that human creativity behind it, just kind of feels a little soulless to me. So I guess we'll see what the next few years bring.
Considering the state of family-friendly media and how it feels like they are sanitized when it comes to discussing certain topics that would be important for children to learn and understand, are there certain challenges that you face as a children's author from that?
For sure, yeah. And I think to a certain extent that we've gotten a lot better. We had a lot to learn. There's much greater representation now in children's books, whether it's, race or differently abled people, or just different family structures. And I think as a whole, the children's book industry has gotten a lot better in terms of that. And as a writer personally, that's much more in my awareness now than perhaps it would have been, 15 years ago. So I think we've made a lot of strides in that regard. Sometimes though, you want to be aware of these things, but you also don't want it to like stifle your creativity, because sometimes you get too much in your head and with all these parameters, and I want to write, you have like an agenda or something like that, which I don't think is ever really a great idea, because I think that just stories should just come organically from us and from our experiences. And so sometimes you really can get too much in your head worrying about those things too much. But absolutely, you have to look at it with fresh eyes and with a critical eye in terms of, do no harm, right? So yeah, it is the whole industry, like I said, has changed so much in many ways for the better over the last several years, I've noticed.
And I'm sorry to backtrack, but there was the thing you mentioned about how there are a good number of parents who, rather than buying physical books, they tend to, give the children digital books, or or just have them read it on a tablet or whatever. And I really do honestly think it is kind of a double-edged sword, but I really do think it is good for children to have the physical books, because especially when it comes to tablets, you know, that gives them too much freedom to, if they accidentally are to expose themselves to something they're not supposed to see yet.
Mhm.
Yeah, even if there's like child locks and all this kind of stuff, there's always the worry, because at least with a book, you can go through the book first. You can be like, okay, this book I feel like is okay for my child to read, and then you give the child to read the book. And I think it's also kind of a sad thing that in the reality we kind of live today, where there's these whole debacles about parents getting mad over what there was that whole issue about like a two words or two sentences in a book that they wanted to like ban a whole book for. It's like, you could the least you could do, the least at least I feel that some of these people who are getting upset over either two sentences in a book, or even kind of the title of the book or the subject matter of a book, the least they could do is actually check the book out before they come to these assumptions. Sorry, it kind of went from like talking about like tablets to,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just the reality of, art in general, whether it's again a movie or it's a painting or whether it is a book. It is subjective, and so what one person loves, another person may hate. And so I'm subjected to reviewers all the time, and not just the professional journals, which in general are pretty kind for the most part. They can throw some zingers in there once in a while, but I'm talking about the platforms that are out there, like on Amazon or Goodreads. Like anybody can say anything about your work, and some people can be very mean. And not that there shouldn't be criticism, and people should share their honest feelings about how they felt about a particular book or whatever. But at the same time, I think there's a way of doing that can be constructive, and ways that are done that it's done in a hurtful manner. And so I kind of, have learned over the years to develop a thick skin in terms of, well, you can't make everyone happy, and nor should we. I mean, that's the beauty of art, right? Is that it stirs up emotions, whether they're good or angry or, inspiring. That's what art is supposed to do. And but yeah, I just think people can be kinder in general when it comes to that kind of thing.
a lot of people, I kind of want to say there's a good number of people right now allowed. I know it's probably more of a loud minority, but because how loud it is, they make people feel like that kindness is a weakness.
Mhm.
And a lot of books nowadays, or a lot of children's media nowadays, is it's it's for the best that we can teach children that it is good to be kind, it is good to be gentle. And I wish that there weren't some of these louder negative voices have such negative opinions about content that's very much, hey, it's okay to be nice, or it's okay to have these feelings, but you have to figure out where to put them in a good way, where I don't know the right way to put it, but at least in a good way, so that you're not hurting somebody, because sometimes these people have these negative views. Sometimes they do want to
Yeah, I think there's a way of, sharing your opinion that's not like destructive or mean spirited. And I think, that's the thing. And I think a lot of, some of the reviewers out there who just want to make a point, or they, I don't know, there's things like anger, but I think that's a minority. I think overall, I'm one of these people. I think overall the world is kind. I think there are good people out there. I think there are people out there with really good intentions. And so those are the ones that I'm going to try to focus on. And I'm not going to, butt heads with anybody who doesn't like my book. I'm just, that's how they felt or whatever. And then just concentrate on the many, many others who loved it.
This might be a question that you might get a lot from people, not just myself included, but what is your writing process like, and has it gone through any various changes over the years?
That's a great question. Well, every book starts with an idea, right? And so my ideas come from all different places. Sometimes it's something I see, sometimes it's something I hear. Sometimes it's a person that I meet that sparks an idea. So my ideas come from all different places. And so once I kind of have an idea, it usually will germinate in my head for a while. And so I do a lot of pre-writing in my head before I actually commit to paper. And I think this is actually the most important step of my writing, because I wait until the idea really becomes more fully formed. Because so there's something about putting those words on paper that feels very permanent, even though you can change them. And I, edit, of course, all my work. But so sometimes an idea will ruminate in my brain for, weeks or even months, sometimes even a year. But once I feel like, okay, it's just ready to burst, and it's ready to tell itself, and then I become kind of a scribe, is the way I call it. I'm just the channel for this work. And so then I just sit down and I just let it flow. And so that's really important to kind of get out of my own way and just get that first draft out. So that first draft is always the trickiest, because you want to just let it free flow. So once I have that beginning, middle, and an end, then I begin the process of revision and editing. And I actually really love that part too. Believe it or not, some people dread it, but I'm really excited. Like when I come down those stairs in the morning and I'm working on something new, because now it's a new day and I have a new set of eyes, and maybe during the night I've kind of solved a problem in my head, or had a dream or something. And so I come down and all of a sudden it becomes more clear what I need to do in terms of revising. So I will revise and revise and revise until the point where I feel like I'm ready for another set of eyes to look at my story. And then I have other writers that we swap stories. And so then it's really good to get feedback from other writers and make changes. And so the whole process can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, depending on the picture book I'm working on. But that's kind of how it goes for me.
Very interesting, because I feel like I'm kind of going through the same kind of a process with a children's book I'm working on right now called The Wonder Ducks. I've been working on it with Doug here, and I've been working on it for like a while now. Originally, I made this as like a short cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
It was just something simple, and it was part of like a big class project we were in, and I thought the finished product could have been a little bit better. So I thought, wouldn't it be pretty cool if I rewrote it as a children's book? And I kept going back and forth, doing a lot of revisions, a lot of rewrites, that kind of thing. And I think, in my opinion, Doug's has been a super help with inputting some of his ideas, as well as ideas for revisions I could incorporate.
Yeah, it's really important to get that feedback, because I think that was where I kind of got stuck in the beginning when I was trying to get published, is I was kind of writing in this vacuum. And of course, everything we write, we think is good, or we wouldn't write it. But you sometimes need that outside, like an objective opinion, for people to say, this part's a little bit confusing. I think your ending could be stronger. I really love this part. just that feedback can be really helpful in moving forward, but also with the caveat that, this is your work and your name is on it. So I don't do everything that somebody might suggest. I kind of weigh like how I feel about it. And so, yeah, that having that confidence comes with time. Like, okay, this is something I really feel strong about. And this, when I work with editors too, because I get editorial letters. Once I sell a picture book to a book publisher and I think my story's done, it's not done. Because often I will get, editorial letters and with, a list of things they want changed. And so then I kind of have to choose my battles, I can do this and I can do this, but this I really feel strongly about. I feel like this is really important to the story. And they're usually pretty good about listening to me and respecting that, this is my work. So yeah, it's an interesting process. And one, I know, James, you've already published a children's book. It's the Dragon Library, 2 of them. Yeah. So yeah, and Jenna, you're a writer as well.
Yeah.
What kind of genre do you write? Do you write children's or do you write young adult or?
I actually plan on writing and developing my own animated TV series.
Wonderful. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going the extra mile.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And and like whether you're writing, a children's book or, a really long novel or even a nonfiction piece of work, I think a lot of the things are all the same, even if it's a movie script. A lot of the steps are very similar. And the main one being butt in chair, because nothing gets done unless you sit and work, right? And so sometimes that's hard for me because I can be a bit spacey, I can be a bit dreamy. And so that's kind of what this book is about. Becoming Charlie is about a caterpillar who has a hard time focusing and is very much a dreamer. And so sometimes that's my hardest thing is like, okay, I need to focus on and put the time in.
Well, one thing I really wanted to mention, my little comment about that system that basically writes the whole like children's book for you. It's like that should be a crime. That should be illegal.
I agree. I mean, how could you put your name on that when you didn't write it?
It's the same question for people that post all these AI arts. It's like it's not your art.
Mhm.
Especially when you have people who actually source the image that the AI basically kind of traced over or interpolated over. It's like these people don't have. You can tell. I get. That's where I get a little bit, upset with where these people are taking credit for work they haven't done, and especially when it's the image specific, AI interpolated art. That's where it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I will say, if I did say anything, on the opposite side of your argument or certain things or whatever, I am sorry. I at least with these 3, they know I have very strong opinions, and I don't mean to. It's just I very much try to be for the people kind of thing or whatever. Like,
don't be sorry. We need your voice.
yeah, and
we really do need your voice because it is a big concern, especially, for creators like us where, we're coming up against the machine here. So we need those human voices to speak out and say this isn't right.
And I know, like, I can't, especially speak 100% for myself because, like I said, I'm more of the visual storyteller compared to James and Jenna. I have at least written a couple scripts, and I had a documentary I did in college and through Think Tank. But I still have, can at least relate into the sense of like the writing aspect, even though like still I'm more into the visual aspect of all of this because it's very frustrating for a lot of people that their work is being taken away, or in the, I don't want to say socio-political sense, whatever, there's people who only see these works at face value and don't actually look into the books. So, you know, it's a very, we're in very frustrating times, and it's very hard to know where's the line? Where do we draw the line for a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, that's a good point.
First of all, Kelly, thank you very much for joining us on the show. And let me see. I know I wrote it down here somewhere. Here it is. Do you enjoy writing for kids?
I actually still love my job very, very much. I feel so fortunate that I have had this career for as long as I've had, because this was my first book back in 2004 that it was published. And so it's been a lot of years, and I still have fun with the writing. I still love going to schools and connecting with young writers and readers and inspiring them to tell their own stories, because everyone has their own unique voice. So yes, I feel very, very fortunate to do the work that I do.